This is Caesar's De Bello Gallico IV, chapter 24. So Caesar has arrived within sight of Britannia at the cliffs of Dover, and he has found that the Britons have laid out a warm welcome for him. So they've lined the cliffs, all armed to the teeth, ready for the arrival of the Romans, because they've heard that the Romans are interested in their island, and they want to ask in person why. Caesar, he drops anchor, he holds a council with his officers, and decides that a new stratagem is required, especially since the cavalry on a different set of transport ships has been delayed, and they haven't shown up yet. So Caesar breaks up the council after deciding that they're going to sail south to find a different beachhead. Sail south 7 miles to find a better landing point. And as Caesar tells us, at barbari, but at being a souped up form of sed, 1t, but the barbari, the barbarians, but the Britanni, but the Brits, consilio Romanorum cognito praemisso equitatu et essedariis. So consilio agrees with cognito, and Romanorum nestle between them, ablative absolute, with the plan, the stratagem of the Romans having been learned of or discovered. Now, praemisso starts a new ablative absolute, which agrees with equitatu. It also agrees with essedariis, but it doesn't look like it does grammatically. It just agrees with it by sense, according to Zugma. So with the equitatu, the horse, the cavalry, set forth, and the chariots and the charioteers. So an essedum is a British war chariot, and I have a little model that I found. Model of a British war chariot. I also posted a video on Google Classrooms that you should check out. It's pretty short. It's like less than 3 minutes. Recreating a British Iron Age war chariot. And this was the favored tactic of the Brits at the time, as Caesar will go on to tell us. So it has this distinct design, and Caesar goes on to tell us later that the Brits who are driving them and fighting and riding on them, they know them so well and they've trained for so long with this style of fighting that they're very acrobatic, and they can run up the pole, or they can do acrobatic things like jump on the horses, jump off the horses, jump back onto the chariot. The preferred style of fighting was to drive the chariot to where there was some form of action, and you could be a little ways off, and you would jump off the chariot, you'd throw a couple spears, jump on the chariot, and you would drive away. Or you could jump on the chariot and be driven into a battle, jump off the chariot, do a little bit of fighting, jump back on the chariot, and drive away. So it's kind of more like a drive-by than anything. This sort of fighting, the Romans do not like it at all. It combines infantry with also the speed of cavalry, which Caesar remarks that is his preferred style of fighting, but he hates to fight against it. Quo plerumque genere in proeliis uti consuerunt. Here we have quo relating back to the essedariis and the equitatu. He just means which quo genere, which style, which kind. Plerum, they mostly consuerunt, were accustomed to uti, to employ or use. So quo genere is the ablative of means, object of uti, which is the present active infinitive of utor, uti, usus sum, to use or make use of. So the object of that is an ablative of means, which they, meaning the Brits, were accustomed to make use of, which kind of fighting the Brits were accustomed to make use of in battles. For the plerumque, for the most part. Reliquis copiis subsecuti, nostros navibus egredi prohibebant. So reliquis copiis subsecuti being a present passive participle of a deponent verb, so translated actively, having followed up, and it agrees with barbari. So the barbarians, they learned of the Roman stratagem, the Roman plan. They sent forth their cavalry and their chariots, which kind of fighting they were accustomed to use in battles. And they followed up with the rest of the forces, who are naturally on foot, and they're not as fast as our four-legged friends. Nostros navibus egredi prohibebant, and they were prohibebant, they were keeping nostros, our men, navibus egredi, from disembarking. You don't need to say ship when you say disembark, because the bark part of disembark means ship, just like you wouldn't need to say embark on a ship. The bark part means ship. So take navibus egredi together to mean to disembark. Or you could just say they were keeping our men from getting off the ships. Erat ob has causas summa difficultas. So erat is in its place right here. It's existential sum. So there was. Or you could say this was summa difficultas. It was the highest difficulty. It was the greatest difficulty. This was extremely difficult, the navibus egredi, disembarking. Ob has causas, on account of these reasons. Or hikai ka can also mean what's just about to be said. So the following. On account of the following reasons, this was very difficult. This was the highest difficulty. Quod, because the naves, the ships, that means the Roman ships, propter magnitudinem, nisi in alto constitui non poterant. The ships, on account of their magnitudinem, on account of their great size, nisi in alto, except in deep water, they were not able to be set up, to be beached. So the Roman ships couldn't be beached or landed properly except in deep water because of their large size. I would imagine they scraped the bottom. And there's something about this beach that they picked, this landing that they picked, that makes it very disadvantageous for the Romans in disembarking. That they find that they have to jump down off the ships and they're not in a great place. The water is too deep, it goes up too high, and they're being impeded by their armor and everything. It's just summa difficultas, as Caesar says. So the ships were not able to be set up except in deep water on account of their great size. And then we have this great part here, militibus autem, ignotis locis, impeditis manibus, magno et gravi onere armorum oppressis, simul et de navibus disiliendum, et in fluctibus consistendum, et cumna hostibus erat pugnandum. And take a breather there. This is an amazing sentence. And what he's doing is he's comparing and contrasting in the first part how the Romans are handling these difficulties. That is not well. And then when we get to the cum illi, it will talk about the Brits, cum illi, whereas they, the others, the Brits, and how the Brits were handling the same situation. So see these as there's one half comparing with the Romans and the other half talking about the Brits. So what we have here is starting from militibus all the way down to pugnandum. If you're looking for a verb, like a proper, finite, real, indicative verb, there it is, erat, right there. Erat is linked up with disiliendum and consistendum and pugnandum, which you can see that clearly right there. But it also links up with disiliendum and consistendum. All of these are passive paraphrastics. They are disiliendum erat, consistendum erat, pugnandum erat, and they hold the subject. The subject is it. Now remember, when you're dealing with passive paraphrastics in Latin, it must always be passive. So the subject here is going to be it if we have intransitive verbs. And we do have intransitive verbs. They are verbs of to jump down, to stand up, and to fight, which in Latin takes to fight with. You don't fight someone in the accusative. You fight with someone or against someone with a preposition. So in transitive verbs, the subject is going to be it. I'm going to translate this literally, the Latin way, and then I'm going to clean it up and do it a more natural English way. I'm going to go ahead and spoil the surprise and say this militibus that he leads us off with to talk about the soldiers, because this is what the soldiers are doing, they would be the subject in the English active paraphrastic, the talking about what the soldiers have to do, because the passive paraphrastic shows obligation or necessity. but the agent of a Latin passive periphrastic is dative. And that's what that guy's doing right there. That's being dative, militibus. So the literal Latin way of doing this, jump down here. It had to be jumped down from the ships at the same time, and it had to be stood up in the waves, and it had to be fought with the enemy by our soldiers at the same time as the places were they were over oppressis, same time as the soldiers were oppressis, overwhelmed. This is a perfect passive participle in the dative, agreeing with militibus. The soldiers were overwhelmed by the ignotis locis, the unknown locale, the unknown places, where they were jumping down from the ships. They didn't know, and they couldn't get their footing, which if you can't get your footing, you can't fight properly. Impeditis manibus, with their hands impeded. So they're overwhelmed by their impeded hands, their hands they're hindered. There's something about their hands, like they're jumping down, they don't have their hands free to hold their shields or their swords. Maybe they have to tread some water because they're in some ways in the water because they can't beach the ships properly and they're not jumping onto dry land. So it is kind of hard to fight in water. Magnot gravi onere armorum oppressis. So they were overwhelmed by the magnot gravi onere, the great and heavy weight, load, burden of their armor, of their weapons. So all of that sounds very odd. Here's the way English would do it. English would make the dative of agent, the one that does the Latin passive periphrastic, the subject. And besides, the soldiers had to jump down from the ships and stand up straight in the waves and fight with the enemy at the same time as, that's what the simul is, being overwhelmed by the unknown locale, by their hands being hindered, and by the great and heavy burden of their armor. I would then put a semicolon, just because that's the way we English speakers tend to think in 2020. Cum illi, this is, we'll explain the subjunctive verbs here. Cum illi aut ex arido, aut paulum in aquam progressi, omnibus membris expeditis, notissimis locis, audacter tella coecerent, et equos in sue factos incitarent. So whereas they, the others, meaning the Brits, the enemy, progressi, perfect passive participle, the deponent verb, translated actively, having progressed, having advanced from dry land. So they're starting in dry land. They're starting on the beach, and they're either from a position of the dry land, aut paulum in aquam, or having advanced a little bit, paulum, a little distance. That's why it's accusative. It's accusative of distance. A little bit in aquam, into the water. So they're not as impeded as the Roman soldiers who are jumping into deeper water. The Brits are keeping to either totally dry land or drier land, or shallower water. Omnibus membris expeditis, with all of their limbs, so it's not just their manibus, like it is with their Romans, their manibus are impeditis. With the Brits, their membris, that's their hands, their limbs, that includes their feet as well. So expeditis, they're not impeditis, they're expeditis, they're not hindered, they're unimpeded. So there's nothing hindering their hands and feet. Notissimis locis, with the places very well known, most well known. Audacter is the adverb of audax. Boldly telle coecerant, they were boldly casting their weapons, and they were incitarent, driving or urging, spurring on their horses in sue factos. In sue factos means they're used to it. So the horses have been trained for this particular type of fighting on a beach or in some form of water. So they are driving or spurring on their horses trained for this action. Notice that the contrasting the Roman soldiers with the British troops, the things that bother the Roman soldiers, the ignotis locis, that is answered by the contrast in the British part of the sentence, notissimis locis, whereas the Romans ignotis locis don't know these places. The Brits notissimis locis, they very well know these places. And whereas the Romans are fighting impeditis manibus, the Brits are fighting omnibus membris expeditis. And the Romans are fighting in, they have to jump down from the ships, and they have to stand up in the waves and fight with the enemy. Well, the Brits are, they're fighting from a place of dry land, or progressing into shallow water. And from there, they're able to boldly, boldly concentrate on fighting instead of trying to find their footing, casting their weapons and driving on their horses who are trained for this sort of fighting. Quibus rebus nostri perterriti, atque cuius omnino generis pugna imperiti, non eadem alacritate ac studio, quo in pedestribus uti proeliis consuerunt utebantur. So quibus rebus, quibus is a relative, refers to everything that's come before it, relates back to all that stuff. Agrees with rebus, ablative stuff. I would imagine it's ablative, could be dative. Nostri, our men, and perterriti. So perfect passive participle, our men, having become scared, our men were terrified by which things, with which situation, which stuff. English prefers the demonstrative over the relative, so our men, terrified by all this stuff. Atque huius omnino generis pugna imperiti. Imperiti is level with perterriti, and atque supt up et, and they are inexperienced. Imperitus takes the genitive of this huius omnino generis, of this kind, this style. Pugnae, also genitive of fighting. Omnino is the adverb form of omnis, so entirely. So our men, terrified by all of these things, and inexperienced entirely of this style of fighting, non eadem alacritate ac studio. And once again, we see alacritas ac studium, alacritas and studium paired together. So non eadem is id plus dem. We have idem, idem, meaning the same. This eadem should have a macron over the a, so you have the ablative agreeing with alacritate, the ablative of alacritas. Remember, alacrity, great English word. It has to do with enthusiasm and speedy enthusiasm, so to be quick and zealous. And also, once again, paired with studium, which means enthusiasm or zeal. These are the objects, ablative of means, objects of utebantur, your main verb here, which once again looks passive, but its deponents are translated as the imperfect active. They, meaning nostri, our men, they were not fighting with the same alacrity and studio and zeal, enthusiasm. Quo, which, consuerunt, they had been accustomed to, uti, present active infinitive, going with consuerunt, accustomed to use in pedestribus proeliis, in pedestrian battles, meaning in battles on foot, battles on dry land. The Romans are not doing well in this watery situation.